This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Somalia's president agrees not to extend presidential term. Chad braces for more protests after 2 people were killed in street clashes. Uganda threatens to shut out refugees unless WFP buys relief food from local farmers. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, Mango Airlines in South Africa forced to suspend operations over unpaid bills. And in sport, Benzema's turner for Real frustrates impressive Chelsea in the UEFA Champions League. We start the hour in Somalia. President Mohamed Farmajo has bowed to pressure, saying he will drop an attempt to extend his term by 2 years. This is after Sunday clashes split security forces along clan lines in the capital, Mogadishu. Government forces loyal to the president exchanged fire with factions that appear to have sided with the opposition. Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble had earlier denounced the proposed term extension and called for a new presidential election. The president's term expired in February and the country failed to conduct elections as planned. Speaking during a televised address, President Farmajo said he welcomed calls for elections to be held without delay.
The federal government of Somalia has always believed and still sees dialogue, compromise, negotiation and the return to the discussion table as the only viable options, while honoring the September 17, 2020 agreement and the recommendations of the Baidoa Technical Committee. I hereby call upon all the signatories of the September 17th agreement to come together immediately for urgent discussions on the unconditional implementation of the above-mentioned agreement. Finally, I urge all security agencies to maintain the stability of the capital and the safety of innocent civilians, avoiding any actions that may lead to insecurity. I also urge the Somali people to support the armed forces in this regard.
Let's now cross live to Mohamed Kahia Mohamud, a local journalist in Mogadishu, Somalia. Mohamed, give us an update on the latest development since that announcement by President Farmajo.
Well, the political temperature has since cooled down since the President's address last night to the nation, and also the Prime Minister's assurance to the people that the government will proceed to September 17, 2020 agreement, which stipulates that there will be indirect elections in the country. The Prime Minister also called upon residents who have been displaced from their homes to return and urged security agencies to maintain law order in the country, especially in the capital where there have been armed violence between the opposition and the government in the past 2 days. And now the Mogadishu is very calm, the temperature is down, and political temperature is down rather, and the international community also has welcomed the progress made towards resolving this crisis, which resorted to violence between the opposition and the government.
So what next, Mohamed? Will the opposition accept the offer of talks from the president, considering the previous differences between the two sides?
Well, the opposition have welcomed this initiative by the government, especially the initiative by the office of the Prime Minister before the President has spoken. But some of the opposition we spoke to say that they are very skeptical about President Farmajo's speech last night, saying that this might be a scapegoat for the President again to try to extend his term in office by using excuses. But we will know what the President's intentions will be when he appears in the Parliament on Saturday to try to reverse this extension plan. And the Speaker of the Parliament has just confirmed that there is extraordinary session, which is by the lower house of Parliament, which passed the extension a month earlier on Saturday. And that is when we will expect what the President's intentions will be.
All right, Mohammed, we appreciate that update. Thank you very much. Mohammed Kahia Mohamud, live for us in Mogadishu. Let's now bring security expert Dr. Mustafa Ali, the CEO of Honor International Institute for Strategic Studies. He joins us via Zoom from Nairobi. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for joining us. If talks fail to take place, what options do the president and the international community have, considering previous negotiations ended in failure?
Thank you, Peninah. The only option that Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has is to return the country back to the path of constitutionalism. Remember, he is in office unconstitutionally after his term in office ended in February. The lower house that extended his term of office, its own term of office actually ended in December of last year. So all those acts of parliament and the term extension are unconstitutional according to the Somali's federal constitution. And the option that we see is for Farmajo to return back to constitutionalism. For the case of international community, they have been very clear that the term extension was not going to be acceptable, and therefore Farmajo, the government, and the Somali population should move towards the election based on the September 17 agreement and principles.
So is this the end for the push for a one-man vote in Somalia?
No, it's not. The one-man, one-vote election is desirable. However, the Somali community, the state itself, the political parties and politicians are not ready for one-man, one-vote in Somalia. There is still no stability. Al-Shabaab is still controlling large swaths of territory in Somalia, and it's unthinkable that the one-man, one-vote is going to take place at this point. What the September 17 agreement basically says is that the country is not ready for one-man, one-vote, and therefore in the interim, they should conduct the indirect elections to legitimize those that are in office or will come to office for another 4 years, within then which time Somalia can prepare for the one-man, one-vote elections.
And will new elections end Somalia's political problems, or are the country's problems deeper than election disputes?
Somalia's problems are much, much deeper than the current electoral disputes. The elections in and of itself is not going to end Somalia's problems. What a credible elections will do is to accord or offer legitimacy to those that will be leading Somalia, who then will have to work very hard, bring the clans together, and to build credible institutions, the Somali National Army, Parliament, the executive, judiciary, and all other institutions. Once those are then built, then there will be more stability. The whole issue of the clanism in Somalia, you can see in the last 3 days, what has happened is that, just to give you one example, the Somali National Army is now fragmented. Different clans have, those personnel belonging to those clans in Somalia have basically retreated and gone back to their clans to pledge loyalty to the kingpins in the clans. And so there is no national army in Somalia to start with. And this clanism is something that Somalia will have to deal with and build a coherent, an ideologically coherent force that is going to secure the country and then start resolving the issues, starting with Al-Shabaab, bring back security, and then organize for a one-man, one-vote elections in the near future.
All right, Dr. Mustafa Ali, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. To Chad now, and the country is bracing for more opposition protests after at least 2 people were killed and 27 injured in street clashes on Tuesday between demonstrators demanding a return to civilian rule and security forces. French President Emmanuel Macron and the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, have condemned the violent action against protesters. Both leaders are calling for a civilian-military solution. Tolisha Balala tells us more.
It's been a week after the military took control of the country, following the death of President Idris Deby. Demonstrators in Chad have taken to the streets demanding a return to civilian rule. Tires have been burning in several neighborhoods in the capital N'Djamena. In a statement on Monday, the Military Transitional Council banned demonstrations while the country is still in mourning. Police have been patrolling the streets under pressure to stop protests. The African Union has expressed grave concern about the military takeover. French President Emmanuel Macron has condemned the violence against demonstrators.
We want to express our worry over the development of the situation in Chad, first of all by strongly condemning the repression of protests and the violence that took place this morning in N'Djamena. We are calling for the respect of the commitments that were taken by the Transitional Military Council, that of peace and political inclusion.
During a meeting in Paris, French President Macron and the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Félix Tshisekedi, say they remain in favor of a peaceful transition in Chad.
Let me be very clear. I gave my support to the integrity and the stability of Chad very clearly in N'Djamena. I support peaceful, democratic, inclusive transition. I do not support a plan of succession, and France will never be on the side of those who form this plan. The time has come to start a national political dialogue that is open to all Chadians. That is what is expected of the Transitional Military Council, and that is the same condition of our support.
On Chad, we are on the same wavelength. We need to quickly restore democratic order. I'm sticking to the same line of thought that I said in N'Djamena. We of course support the current stability, but under the condition that they go quickly towards the consolidation of democracy, of democratic institutions.
Meanwhile, in his first address to the nation, Military Council leader Mahamat Idris Deby has called on international support to improve the situation in the country.
Chad needs the national and international community to succeed in this transition, as the challenges are huge. Chad needs massive support from its partners to stabilize an economic and financial situation heavily impacted by the security, health, humanitarian and social situation. I also want to reassure our partners that Chad will continue to hold its own and take on its responsibilities in the fight against terrorism, and will respect all its international commitments.
Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Nigerian lawmakers have asked that President Muhammadu Buhari declares a state of emergency in the country. This is as a result of heightened insecurity challenges in different parts of the country, from kidnappings, insurgent attacks and banditry. Our correspondent Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
The House of Representatives made the call for a state of emergency after concluding plenary on Tuesday in Abuja. They warned that the security crisis has worsened. The lower house of the National Assembly also resolved to summon the country's heads of security to brief them on the current efforts to curb the kidnappings and attacks on lives and properties. Similarly, members of the legislature's upper chamber, the Senate, are scheduled to meet with President Buhari soon to deliberate more on these security issues. There's been an uptick in attacks by unknown criminals, including the kidnapping of students and other citizens, while suspected members of Boko Haram insurgents have attacked several parts of the country's north. About 80 people have reportedly been killed and at least 60 more kidnapped across the country in the past 1 week alone. Since December, 6 schools, mainly in the north, have been attacked, and many students have yet to be rescued from the hands of kidnappers. Meanwhile, in a virtual meeting held on Tuesday with the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, President Muhammadu Buhari urged the U.S. to relocate its Africa Command from Germany to Africa. The president did not indicate if Nigeria was offered as a headquarters for the command, but there were calls for the U.S. to do more to assist Nigeria and West Africa in tackling the worsening security crisis in the region. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken conducted his first virtual meeting with Kenyan and Nigerian presidents. In his first meeting as Secretary of State with the Nigerian president, Blinken praised the strong relations between the U.S. and Nigeria that span 6 decades. The two leaders discussed recent developments on policy and post-COVID-19 economic recovery.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, our relations have been strong for 60 years, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to work with you and your team on building on that foundation and charting a shared vision to guide our strategic partnership for the coming years. I look forward to discussing our cooperation in responding to a challenge to all of humanity, COVID-19, as well as our sustained efforts to strengthen global health security, so we're better prepared for the next disease outbreak. I also hope to discuss how we can build our economies back even better and stronger after the pandemic, growing them and making them more equitable. Investing in protecting the most vulnerable communities in our countries, I think, contributes to our goal of building a lasting security for Americans and for Nigerians.
Nigeria attaches great importance to the relations with the United States. Let me, in this connection, express appreciation to President Joe Biden for his welcome and reaching decision to repeal the immigration restriction known as the Muslim ban on travel and visas for citizens predominantly from Muslim nations and African countries, including Nigeria. I also wish to congratulate the United States for rejoining the World Health Organization and Paris Agreement on climate change.
And in their conversation with the Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta said he was happy to see the United States taking its leadership position back on matters of climate change. Kenya was among 40 countries that took part in last week's virtual Global Climate Summit, where they promised to abandon kerosene lanterns for solar lamps. Compared to the United States and other wealthy but carbon-addicted nations, Kenya stands out as a third world country closing the technology gap despite limited financial resources.
This is a wonderful thing, taking your leadership position back. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's something that's great for us who are sufferers, let me say, of the devastating challenges that have been posed by climate change. And it's really wonderful to see yourselves back. Truly grateful of our continued partnership on defense. Looking forward to continue the ongoing discussions with regard to our FTA. Looking forward to also, in this very difficult moment, working together with you with regard to our COVID response and to seeing how America can once again take her leadership and really help our developing nations that, if we don't take great care, are likely also to bear the biggest brunt of this COVID challenge.
And to your point, Mr. President, it was terrific to have your participation in the climate summit that President Biden convened. One of the number of global challenges that we know we have to tackle together. COVID-19 being the other, I could not agree with you more that none of us will be fully safe until everyone is. And I look forward to discussing that and to looking at ways we can make our cooperation even more effective.
This is Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. Egypt begins local manufacture of Russian Sputnik V COVID vaccine. And Uganda threatens to shut out refugees unless the WFP buys relief food from local farmers.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
we celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I believe we only need a tool to bring change. And this tool to me, it can be educational background, it can be a skill, it can be a hobby of what you love.
Kibira yenyewe ilikuwa mbaya kitambo, kulikuwa na waizi wengi sana. Na siku hizi yenyewe hata unaweza kaa bila kusikia hata mwizi ameshikwa mahali ama amechomwa ama amefanywa nini. Ndio naona yenyewe Kibira raundi si kama kitambo.
Let's now head to Burkina Faso, where at least 4 people have been killed in an attack by an armed group on a convoy. According to the government, 3 of the victims are foreigners.
The attack in Burkina Faso's Fada Ngourma Palma region targeted a convoy of civilians and security officers. Soldiers, forest rangers and foreign reporters were part of the anti-poaching patrol.
It seems that it was their very first mission. It was a patrol to secure the forest and fauna areas. That's when they took the Fada Palma route. And it is in the forest area, the presidential area for hunting tourism, that the attack happened. We must say that it happened where the road becomes deteriorated. It means that you can't drive fast. Deteriorated roads with lots of vegetation are suitable areas for ambushes.
The government initially reported 4 as missing, including 2 Spanish nationals and 1 from Ireland. The attackers have not yet been identified. Security agencies suspect an Islamic militant group is behind the attack.
After the kidnapping of Huawei workers in Banfora in late November 2019, the feedback we received after the analysis say the group for the support of Islam and Muslims had identified a number of Western nationalities. If they captured these people, the risk of them killing these people were very high.
Like much of West Africa's Sahel region, Burkina Faso has been grappling with a deepening security crisis. There have been an increasing number of attacks by jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
The Chinese embassy in Senegal has handed over 130,000 surgical masks to the Association of Mayors of Senegal. This is part of support efforts against the COVID-19 pandemic. The donation is from the Chinese People's Foreign Friendship Association. Chinese ambassador to Senegal, Xiao Han, said China has continued to support the West African nation since the pandemic began. China also donated vaccines to the nation early this year.
This is in line with President Xi's governance conviction that says putting the people at the heart of our concern, and also the conviction of President Macky Sall of serving people, not serving ourselves.
The donation we received today will be distributed to 12 health districts of the Dakar region, because Dakar has been the hardest hit in this pandemic, and so we want these masks to be used by professionals as quickly as possible.
Here on the African continent, the Nigerian government says it is expecting nearly 30 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. Nigeria aims to vaccinate at least 40% of its population before the end of this year. Reporting from Jos, here is Tasem Akende.
Some 29.8 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been promised to Nigeria, according to the head of the country's health body, Dr. Faisal Shuaib. No exact date has been given for the arrival of the vaccines, but Dr. Shuaib says the government signed off to receive the vaccines through the African Union. The primary healthcare boss also stated that more AstraZeneca vaccine deliveries through the COVAX facility are expected by the end of May or early June. He says that will allow Nigeria to administer the second dose of the vaccines it received in March to those who got their first jabs. Dr. Shoaib noted that nearly 1.2 million Nigerians have received their first dose of their AstraZeneca vaccine shot. That is almost 60% of the eligible groups targeted in the first phase. The government says it's making efforts to hit its target of vaccinating at least 40% of its citizens in 2021 and another 30% by the end of 2022. Tessim Akendi, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Egypt has begun the process to locally manufacture the Russian COVID-19 vaccine, the Sputnik V. The latest deal sealed by Egyptian pharmaceutical company Peninah will see Russian vaccine-making technology transferred to Egypt. The initial plan is to produce 40 million doses annually to cover domestic needs as well as exports to the rest of Africa. Here's Adel Mahri with more details.
Egypt is set to become a hub for the manufacture of COVID-19 vaccines in North Africa and the Middle East. The Russian Direct Investment Fund has announced an agreement to produce Sputnik V domestically in Egypt.
We met the Russian ambassador in Cairo to investigate beginning vaccine manufacturing. Sputnik V is already registered by the Drug Authority. We're also encouraging the private sector, whether Minopharm or Faso, vaccines will be seasonal, because mutations arise all the time, so we'll always need to develop them regularly.
Peninah, an Egyptian pharmaceutical, will lead the production of some 40 million doses annually. The transfer of Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine-making technology will begin immediately, according to the announcement. Production is set to start in the third quarter of this year.
COVID-19 erupted suddenly, but Egypt was already moving with a plan to produce vaccines and medicines in general. Last month, Egypt launched a medicine production city, which is the biggest in the region. All this is helping it to attract international companies. This is the best time for Egypt to cooperate with several big nations when it comes to a global health crisis and the implications of COVID-19 on the world.
This is the second COVID-19 vaccine production deal that Egypt has secured this month. Vaxera, the government's vaccine production arm, earlier announced finalizing a similar agreement with Chinese company Sinopharm. Egypt expects to produce 100 million COVID-19 vaccines annually through the two companies. As the world suffers from a major interruption of the COVID-19 vaccine supply chain, Egypt moved to secure doses by manufacturing them. Both China's Sinopharm and Russia's Direct Investment Fund say their vaccine plants in Egypt will supply Africa with the jabs it needs. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Uganda has threatened to close its doors to refugees unless the World Food Programme buys its supplies from local farmers. This comes at a time when the UN Food Agency says it desperately needs over $200 million to properly feed over 1 million refugees in Uganda. Leon Senyange reports.
Mealtime at this refugee camp in mid-western Uganda. The rush is for this maize meal and beans. It is what the refugees here eat daily. Most of it is imported. Now, Uganda is demanding that the UN World Food Programme buys food from its farmers to feed these refugees.
We are going to cause no procurement of food from outside Uganda by the World Food Programme. Let the money remain here. Our farmers there are a lot of food around here. Cereals are there.
The World Food Programme, however, says it purchased over 110 metric tons of locally produced food in 2020. But there are concerns over Uganda's capacity to meet food standards.
One of the issues to tackle there, Honourable Minister, is the issue of the poor quality of post-harvest handling. This is the only reason why, despite investing for several years, we have not been able to purchase locally in Uganda.
Last March, Kenya banned the importation of Uganda's maize flour over safety concerns. The food crisis is growing, with the World Food Programme struggling to provide food for the refugees. Last December, the food agency was forced to cut its rations by 40%.
When we do not have the needed resources to provide the food that refugees require to feed them on every single day, we are forced to apply ration cuts. The ration cuts are applied in a way that still allow us to provide sufficient energy and calories to keep and sustain lives. And this is the primary focus of that. So as we go forward, depending on the funding situation, you will see ration cuts going up and down.
The World Food Programme says it requires $221 million to end the cuts to more than 1.2 million refugees who rely on assistance to meet their daily food needs. The continuing growth of displaced populations in Uganda is driving an increase in the demand for food. And with limited supply, small-scale farming interventions that encourage the production of vegetables and staple foods are being promoted in the settlements, at least until when the UN Food Agency can fully restore the full rations. Leon Sonyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
It's 1:30. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Mango Airlines in South Africa forced to suspend operations over unpaid bills. And Uganda considers debt suspension in economic recovery plan.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Africa's low-cost carrier, Mango Airlines, has grounded all flights and suspended services ahead of schedule. The accelerated demise of the airline looks to be in full swing after a whole host of flights were either delayed significantly or cancelled. The company has also scrapped all flight bookings from May onwards, and it now looks as if fulfilling its obligations will prove to be a significant challenge.
SAA grounded operations over a year ago when the country went into lockdown. It hasn't been able to fly since, even when lockdown restrictions eased. The airline's business rescue process has dragged on for over a year, and still there is not enough money. This is starting to impact Mango, which is 100% owned by South African Airways.
I can confirm that Mango, together with its board, are in sensitive discussions with the shareholder on the delayed funding, including the future of Mango. I can also confirm that we are yet to receive funding, and once a decision has been reached on funding, we will communicate that accordingly to the public. Also that we're operating normally as we speak, and any decision on the future of Mango, etc., should be made public in due course.
It's a grim trajectory for an airline that has been running successfully for 15 years. But COVID restrictions on air travel has left most airlines struggling to stay in the air.
I don't think that there will be a quick solution unless somebody provides a loan based on government guarantees to bail it out for a little while. But otherwise, I think the airline won't be able to continue operations as the aircraft will actually be grounded.
Earlier this year, government committed a further $733 million to SAA. $180 million of that was meant for SAA subsidiaries. Most of the money has been dispersed to SAA, but there's been a delay in funding for its subsidiaries because of an amended appropriations bill that needs to be proclaimed into law. This means that Mango could only get money by June.
They still have an option to lease in aircraft, but it depends on whether those suppliers would be willing to risk not getting paid, So it is probable that the airline would not be able to continue operating from the 1st of May onwards.
If nothing comes through in the next few days, Mango may suspend operations for a few months until it is able to fly again. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Uganda is considering approaching its creditors to suspend the country's loan repayment until the economy recovers. Last year, the government took up large loans from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and other financiers to fund key priority sectors hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. But economic experts warn that Uganda may fail to meet its debt obligations if it continues to borrow. CGTN's Michael Balake has more.
Uganda has been borrowing heavily to fund COVID-19 related expenditure and also cover revenue shortfalls. The country's total public debt reached $18 billion by December 2020, a 35% rise from the previous year. The amount, according to economists, is likely to surpass the 50% threshold in the next financial year.
Government needs to bring this under control because and the easiest way to do this is to cut down on expenditure. Initially, government this year had proposed a budget of 41 trillion. Now it's gone back to 45 trillion. Okay, why? Because some people are willing to lend us money.
Uganda is using borrowed money to finance its ambitious infrastructure program to construct roads, dams and investments in oil and gas. The government is now considering dialogue with its large creditors like China, the IMF and World Bank to negotiate a new loan repayment schedule.
Now this is a very bad signal to lenders. Lenders want to be sure, because this is sovereign debt, they want to be sure that you'll come through when your obligations are due. Okay? Now if we start negotiating, start rescheduling, it means we'll become an unreliable borrower.
In this financial year, the country plans to use 20% of its total tax collections to pay interest rates on its public debt. Uganda, like many African countries, is struggling to revive its economy following the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the slow rollout of vaccines is creating more uncertainty, and the World Health Organization says this could prolong the pandemic. Uganda has reported more than 40,000 cases of COVID-19 and about 330 deaths. The country has administered at least 270,000 doses of vaccines so far, a move that has driven the government to ease pandemic restrictions on trade, transport, and other key economic activities.
The economy is picking up, and I see signs, very clear signs. I hope COVID does not now turn around again to come and dump us.
Uganda recently signed oil and gas agreements that will see the country build a $3.5 billion oil export pipeline from Hoima in the west to the Indian Ocean Tanga port in Tanzania. The agreements are expected to unlock more than $10 billion worth of investments into the economy, which the government believes will help it to pay off its rising debt. Michael Balake, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Tunisian authorities have announced relief measures to cushion companies impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Also, to benefit are those that have not been able to settle their tax debts for 2019 and 2020. CGTN's Adnet Shawashi reports that companies have been given a grace period of up to 7 years to settle tax obligations with the state.
The Tunisian government explained that this payment advantage will include companies which have not yet concluded payment schedules for their tax debts for 2019 and 2020. Prime Minister Hisham Al-Shishi said the new tax facilities are part of the economic rescue plan.
The measure is part of the economic rescue plan, which was developed with our social partners. The government's willing to support companies to overcome this difficult period. We will save the affected SMEs, protect jobs, and save the country's economy.
Tunisian entrepreneurs have welcomed the state initiative. However, many business owners believe the government was too slow to react to the economic crisis.
The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated many sectors and affected nearly all private companies. The role of the state is decisive. The government was absent for more than a year since the start of the health and the economic crisis. The recent measures will help companies improve liquidity.
According to the National Institute of Statistics and the National Organization of Entrepreneurs, more Tunisian firms face specter of bankruptcy due to the COVID-19-induced economic crisis.
More than 60% of enterprises, or 450,000 companies in Tunisia, are threatened with bankruptcy. More than 70,000 SMEs have definitely closed. The numbers are shocking. Hundreds of thousands of workers have lost their jobs. The new government measures in favor of companies are important, but we need more support and incentives.
In addition to the tax payment advantages, the Ministry of Finance has also launched a new support mechanism. More than 500 SMEs will benefit from the endowment line of support for the financial restructuring this year. As businesses are forced to stop operations, the Tunisian government has issued several tax incentives to mitigate the economic and social impact of the crisis. Authorities assert that the relief program for SMEs affected by the pandemic will protect up to 200,000 jobs. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
It is now 1 year since the first COVID-19 cases were recorded across the continent. To date, available statistics show that around 3% of the population has contracted the virus. The heavy impact, however, will be on the economy. The IMF says Africa is the region in the world that will register the slowest growth. Today, we look at how the pandemic has disrupted supply chains in Africa and the globe. Angela Kopler now looks at the South African mining sector, which is the mainstay of the continent's most industrialized economy.
The South African mining sector took a massive 30% hit in production levels in the second quarter of 2020. This was followed by a 40% recovery in the third quarter.
But the fourth quarter was not that, was disappointing, let me put it that way. We thought, look, you won't get another 40% increase, but it was actually very flat. In short, we ended up about 12% below in terms of production.
Fortunately, there was strong support from commodity prices and another surprise.
It continued to improve over the period by 24% in total. The second surprise was everybody thought, including institutions like the World Bank, that supply chains would be disrupted. Now, us supplying to the rest of the world was a bit disrupted because of logistics, but definitely not in the first phase. We didn't find any disruption in our supplies coming to us.
In-country logistical challenges didn't help matters when it came to the country's rail and harbours network. Then there were the border posts, and there were two impacts there.
One, people moving out and out of South Africa, the SADC workers moving out and then coming back. And the second part is actually getting product to mainly the Maputo corridor, to the Maputo harbour.
The sector employs over 400,000 people from South Africa and its neighbouring countries, 13% of whom aren't back at work yet.
There are still about 60,000 people not back at work because of the risk, either age and then linked to that comorbidities like diabetes and silicosis and TB and whatever. And we know that because we screen all workers every day.
The South African mining sector were lucky. The surging commodity prices cushioned it from some of the blows felt by other industry sectors. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Africa is a key source of raw materials for key industries across the globe. CGTN's Wang Mengjie spoke to experts on how economic impact from the virus, especially supply chain disruptions, have affected Chinese companies doing business with the continent.
Africa has been hit hard by COVID-19. Available statistics to date show around 3% of the continent's population has contracted the virus, and the regional economy could take a beating, with a UN report from March showing Africa could face its first recession in 25 years. with output losses due to the virus estimated to reach $99 billion. Additionally, the IMF says Africa registered the slowest growth in the world in 2020, with its GDP falling by 2.6% last year.
Africa could learn from China, which has formed a whole industrial supply chain. Companies involved in such a chain help it grow by fostering its self-circulation.
Africa has been a source of raw materials for global industries, but the onset of COVID-19 has disrupted the supply chains, including for said materials. So how have supply disruptions from Africa impacted the Chinese industrial companies?
Raw materials can be produced like they usually are. Freight charges have gone up sharply. Plus, there's the cost of nucleic acid testing and also human resources management, needed to help workers whose mental health has been affected by the pandemic.
Experts say Chinese companies are switching things up on the continent due to the pressure. Some companies have switched from importing iron ore from Africa, for example, to importing recycled iron steel from other countries instead. One firm, the Hongqiao Group, has strengthened its development of iron ore mines on the continent to break through supply disruptions by eliminating the middleman. But Professor He says China-Africa cooperation will be in good shape moving forward.
China will launch its vaccination program for both Chinese and African employees on the continent, which will build a more secure bamboo fence for health security. This will offer more promising economic cooperation between China and African countries amid the threat of COVID-19.
Professor He believes bilateral coordination in 2021 will be better than last year, especially with this year being the final year for the implementation of outcomes of the Beijing summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. Top African streaming platform focuses on local productions.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Canada, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Online streaming platform Showmax is investing in production of its own local content for African audiences. Showmax is competing against Netflix for audience attention on the continent. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma reports.
Different kinds of justice.
Come on, Janine.
Online content meant to capture the attention of audiences in Africa.
She contacted me. Akisema she had a story to tell that would shock the city.
For us, it really is about getting the local entertainment, which we know our African audiences enjoy, programming in their languages, stories reflecting their realities, their hopes and their dreams, making that as widely available as possible. And for that reason, we now look at mobile subscriptions as well as the regular lean back.
MultiChoice is Africa's largest pay TV group. It is available in 50 African countries. Its streaming service, Showmax, was launched in 2015 and is available in 46 African countries. The company is focused on developing productions set in its biggest markets of Nigeria, Kenya and South Africa.
I think people have far more power to influence and to make sure that people who are relying on others, to pay subscriptions or to bring their eyeballs to your platforms, that you listen to what they are telling you, because there is so much choice out there now. If you don't listen to your customers and if you are not reflecting their realities and providing solutions for them, they simply have hundreds and hundreds of other places where they can take their eyeballs or their wallets.
The company released 6 new original productions in 2020. Of this, one was a reality TV series from Nigeria and another police procedural drama set in Kenya.
They know that the stories that we are telling from our own backyard will find global audiences, and for me that's a wonderful reality.
Broadcasters on the African continent are under huge pressure to keep viewers engaged. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And coming up in sports, Benzema's turnover for Real frustrates impressive Chelsea in the UEFA Champions League.